So today we're interviewing Eric Holthusen. Eric is Chief Technology Officer of Petronas Lubricants International. So Eric, it's been a while since we caught up with each other. I first met you when you were with Shell Research Center in Singapore. So how have you been? What have you been up to since that time?
Hi Vicky. It has been a long time. It's 20 years, and I think a lot has happened. In particular, we started together with UNEP on making fuels in Asia cleaner, and now we see where we are today. There's no more lead. We have reduced sulfur in a lot of the countries considerably. And if I look back, I look back with pride because I feel part of this process, and I think those who have been involved have done a very good job for the Asian people, more or less.
Yes, so you were part of the UNEP Partnership for Clean Fuels and Vehicles. And I think if I remember correctly, it was last year when they announced that finally lead is completely off the market around the world. So that is quite an accomplishment. And how difficult was it to take lead out of gasoline?
Here in Asia, it was of course difficult because there were a few countries that were very resistant to the takeout for various reasons. And once the decisions were made, there were still large stockpiles that had to be drawn down. And over time, but resilience pays off. Don't take no for an answer and try again. And I think that it was a painful process, but in the end, it was successful. And now the next step, of course, is reducing the sulfur in Asia as well. And we are on a very, very good path. And I think soon we will see all European standard fuels all over Asia.
Okay, let's start from the beginning. What's wrong about sulfur? We know what's wrong about lead.
Is sulfur, as we know, is not a pollutant itself. It's an enabler for better exhaust gas after treatment devices, and that's why we need to get to very low or even eliminate sulfur altogether. Once you are below the Euro 2 threshold, it really becomes an enabler. And to have modern technology all throughout Asia for trucks in particular, you need those low sulfur level or sulfur-free fuels.
So we're talking about really 10 parts per million, not
Correct.
Zero sulfur, right?
Correct.
Okay.
If we can go to 50 everywhere, that would be a big step, and the ultimate goal is 10, of course.
And where are we now in Asia?
We have a mixed bag, but I think a lot of the Asian countries now have access to 10 ppm already. 50 is the standard, with a few countries still above the 50 limit. And the question is why it's that way. It's the refinery infrastructure that is outdated and needs heavy investments. And unfortunately, also with the current situation, there is not so much capital available to do the necessary steps, and governments are prepared to step back a little bit, I think, and wait because of the situation.
I think in Asia Pacific, including Australia, the only government that seems to be supportive of refinery upgrades at this point is really Australia. They just gave a grant, if I'm not mistaken, to Viva Energy to upgrade the old Shell refinery so that it can continue to operate with lower sulfur. But of course, they are in a different situation, aren't they? They're really after energy security.
Correct. Yeah. I think in Australia, I followed that very closely. I believe it's a matter of national energy security that Australia wants to maintain at least a minimum level of in-country refining.
Yes, and they only have two left, and so that that really brings them down to not having too much of an option if both refineries have to close down because they can't meet the sulfur requirement.
Correct.
Yeah, but since your fuel, you started in Asia working on fuels, then you moved to Saudi Arabia to work in the research center of Saudi Aramco, and then you moved to Petronas. But in this role, you're actually involved in lubricants. And of course, you did have a lubricants background right from the beginning. Tell us what your lubricant background is and how you became Chief Technology Officer of Petronas Lubricants.
Yeah, I've have background in both. I think I started my career more than 30 years ago as a lubricant scientist and worked for the first 10 years of my career predominantly on lubricants, but then got involved into low sulfur fuel introduction in Europe. So I was part of the European initiative to introduce Euro 2, which was the first big step to clean diesel fuels in Europe. So that's how I get my fingers a little bit wet with fuels. Then when I moved to Asia, I covered fuels and lubricants, and then concentrate on fuels because that was where I think with my background I could help most in Asia. Um, my role in Aramco was also concentrating on fuels because Saudi Arabia at that point, the fuels were not up to date and it was mostly without additives. So we looked into additive introduction in the Saudi Arabian market. And then the call came from Petronas whether I would be interested to join them. And I think the challenge here was that Petronas had various lubricants parts within its organization. Strong presence in Brazil, strong presence in South Africa, presence in Italy, traditionally through the acquisition of Fiat Lubrificanti, and then the homegrown lubricants business in Malaysia, so covering Asian neighbors. And the challenge was to pull this all together into a global organization, both for an R&T setup, but also for technical services to ensure that the global competence and wisdom that we had accumulated over time was available to our customers throughout our global presence. And it took a few years, but now I would say we have a very strong global organization.
What year did you move to Petronas, Eric?
I moved in 2013, which also coincided with the start of the partnership with Mercedes and Formula One.
So that was 9 years ago.
Correct.
And today, how different is the global footprint of Petronas Lubricants?
It's a lot different, I would say, and particularly when it comes to our product portfolio. We have harmonized our product portfolio across the globe. We can today guarantee to our customers the same quality throughout. Yeah, so there is no more difference between whether you sit in Europe or whether you sit in Brazil or in China. We have modern blending plants under my supervision. We built two, one in China and one in India, that are up and running up to the latest standards. And of course, all this is supported by a technical service team that has presence very close to our customers. So we don't have to wait for anyone to wake up in a different time zone. We have technical support present in all time zones that can jump in and help customers whenever it's required.
So actually, Petronas is one of very few national oil companies that operate their lubricants business globally. Where are you in terms of market share globally?
Globally, I think we are scratching around to the 5%, or 5% is the ambition. But it's very, very fragmented. We have strong markets like South Africa, Malaysia, Italy, Brazil, where our market share is above 10%. So we are very strong players. And then, of course, we have markets that are important for us, like India and China, where we still around the 1% threshold. But we believe we have what it takes to be successful in those markets as well.
So in terms of market share, Shell is the top marketer in the world. Now, how difficult would it be to be another Shell?
If I think it's very, very difficult for any other company to get there. Do we have the ambition as Petronas? Not at that spread. So we go with an approach that is select and focus. We know where our strengths are, and we focus on those. And we know where it would be difficult to enter the market. We talked over the past days at the conference here about aviation lubricants, and I think if you are not involved, it would be very difficult to get involved and to get a significant share. And there are other parts of the lubricants business where you think twice whether it's something you should invest in.
Yeah, because traditionally the aviation lubricants segment, and you having been part of Shell know this, has always been a major market. I mean, it's a market that's dominated by majors simply because getting certification by airlines, aircraft, and other manufacturers, and even the FAA, is really very tough.
Mm-hmm.
So that's cannot be an aspiration for just any company.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not necessarily the sophistication of the technology, is the accreditation. And the second aspect in aviation as well as in marine is the supply chain. Global airlines, global shipping companies, they would expect you to have presence in all major locations. And the big companies are best situated to ensure that presence.
Yeah, it seems like in the marine lubricant business, it's a little bit easier. It seems like I've seen some independent, quote unquote, companies that have made some headway in marine lubricants. Where is Petronas in that space?
Currently, we play more in coastal marine, where we have presence, like in Malaysia. Yeah. So we have no ambitions to become a global marine lubricants company at this point in time, I would say. I don't know what the future holds, but this is not an area we focus on. Now we have clear strengths, and one of our strengths is agriculture, for example. We have a very strong portfolio. We have a good technical background to years and years of working with Case New Holland, who are at the sharp end of the agriculture machinery technology, and we have lifted each other up, I would say. And so today, the portfolio that we have in agriculture is second to none. So we can cover the whole hardware area of agricultural companies.
We're talking about immobility right now at the ALIA annual meeting. There have been some movements towards e-mobility in the agriculture sector. Where do you see that long term? Is that going to be a big shift or just a very niche shift in agriculture?
It will be a big shift in the long term, but there's a lot of mileage left in traditional lubricants in agriculture. That seems to be the case. You look at hydraulic applications, in particular in that sector, as well as in other off-road sectors like mining and construction. It seems that the hydraulic actuators at least those that are not heavy duty, will be replaced by electric actuators over time. So drivetrains, hydraulic actuators will go to electric. That means volumes of hydraulic lubricants will disappear. That's the reality. But it will take time. Agriculture, mining, and construction equipment have a lot longer life cycle than passenger cars or trucks. So we're talking probably about a time horizon of beyond 2040, where the lubricant industry would feel the loss of that market.
Now, two things on the hydraulic side, Eric. Number one, hydraulic is really, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, it's more of it's not highly additized. It's a volume market. But on the other hand, though, if you talk about Europe now, maybe not so much in Asia, big move towards biodegradable hydraulic fluid. Where would you say Asia is right now in terms of biodegradability requirements? Are people looking for that, or there's really not too much of a market here in Asia for biodegradable or environmentally acceptable fluids?
It's appearing, but it's still small. It's not high on the agenda. Where I see progress in hydraulic fluids is with the CO2 question as well, because today we can design hydraulic fluids that reduce the energy consumption significantly. Yeah? And to an extent that, on one hand, of course, it's the CO2, but if you talk to a customer, the customer, yes, he's looking at CO2, but what is close to his heart is total cost of ownership and total cost of operation. And if you can show that your hydraulic fluids is actually helping to reduce the diesel fuel bill, you can have a very meaningful discussion with the customer. And that's where I see the next step in hydraulic to go.
But would that be a function of the additives, or would that be a function of the base oil?
It's a combination, but the base oil will play a very important role in there because of the viscosity that you aim at.
Yeah, so today in the passenger car market, the shift is almost complete from Group 1 towards Group 2 and Group 3 for passenger car. In the hydraulic side, though, what is still the most commonly used base oil for lubricant formulation in that segment?
Yeah, it's Group 1, Group 2. It depends on where the price is set. So the hydraulic market will always go to the lowest price level for the bulk. But that bulk is shrinking, so we see a move towards more, let's call them premium hydraulic fluids as well. So suddenly we have synthetic, we have Group 3 come into play to ensure that the viscosity can get to levels that will result in significant energy reductions.
And normally those fluids they're using they're called premium because they're higher price, right? So what type of sub-segment would be more amenable to paying the higher price versus the ones that are, oh, it's okay to just use a regular hydraulic fluid?
I look at the off-road sector, like construction, mining, where a lot of diggers are used, a lot of hydraulic cylinders that move heavy loads, and as such have a very high base load from the energy perspective. And if you have a very high base load and you can reduce by, let's say, 0.5% or 1%, the absolute gain that you have is very attractive.
Let's talk about something that's really close to your heart, I think, which is the passenger car segment. So Petronas is very heavily involved in Formula One, and I know you've given a lot of talks on this. I've seen you on YouTube. You're a personality on YouTube. Tell us the work you're doing in this area. This is very exciting, as you hinted yesterday.
Yeah, as Petronas, we cover all fluids in the Formula One car, which is the Mercedes car, but also associated teams that use Mercedes hardware. And of course, the lubricant is what we're looking at, where I'm involved. But we're also doing the fuels, and the fuels are a very important performance element for the Formula One car. So this year, or over the past years, Formula One has introduced biofuels starting in 2013 with 5.75%. Today, this year, for the first time, we use 10% of biofuels. So what we learn formulating those fuels, we can directly apply to our retail fuels that Petronas retails only in 2 markets, in Malaysia and in South Africa. For lubricants, of course, the knowledge we gain, we can directly use everywhere where our lubricants are marketed. And it stays the same. It's all about friction reduction, reducing the friction losses in the engine and in the drivetrain of the Formula One car. And every year we improve. The friction losses are reduced through viscosity and through friction modification. And then what we also discussed yesterday, what is probably a bit unknown, is that the Formula One cars today are hybrid cars, and they have a battery. They have an electric system, and this electric system, the battery, is cooled by a coolant that is a hydrocarbon. And this is what EVs, at least high performance EVs, will also use today. And so when we talk to EV manufacturers, we can look back and say, we have already almost 10 years of experience in formulating and testing those fluids because they are used in Formula One racing. The Formula One car has a hydrocarbon cooling fluid that cools the electrical circuit of the battery system, of the hybrid system.
But would they have a concern because you're using a hydrocarbon-based fluid? Would they want to use an alternative? Are there alternatives in the market today?
There are alternatives to it, but when it comes to the efficiency of the fluids, so we have, I think, the maximum efficiency built in our fluids. So any alternative that there is, we have already looked at. So Formula One is very, very competitive. So you always have to ensure that you're at the sharp end of technology.
Yeah, and I guess in Formula One, maybe cost is less important, but in the real world, in the market, when you're now selling an oil, cost is really important, isn't it?
It is, yes, yeah.
So there's going to be a compromise between the formula that you can put in the market versus the one you're using for Formula One.
Absolutely, yeah, that's correct, and that's why I emphasize more on the learning. We know what to do to satisfy the needs of the hardware, and while in Formula One we use the best that there is because cost is not an issue, we know what to do to get close to the best at a lower cost level.
So having been involved in this field for more than 20 years now, give us some insights of your learnings. And particularly over the past 2 years, I was curious, Eric, you were mentioning you used to be based in Italy, and during the pandemic, you moved to Malaysia. And tell us the story. What happened?
Right. I based myself in Italy for 2 years after we had built our new technology center to really focus on getting it up and running, getting the right resources in place. But that was always meant to be a temporary assignment while my real work is at the Petronas headquarters in Kuala Lumpur. And then I was on a trip in Kuala Lumpur at the beginning of the pandemic, and Italy was the first country. If we look back 2 years, yeah, Italy was the first European country that was heavily hit by the virus. And when I wanted to go back to Italy from my business trip, I was told that Italy was off limits for any business trip, and even me being based there, I was not allowed by my employer to return to Italy. So then, very early, I started to end my assignment in Italy, worked from Kuala Lumpur, and when the first opportunity came to go to Italy, I just wound up my private affairs there and moved back to Kuala Lumpur.
So you've been in Kuala Lumpur now for the last 2 years.
Yes, more or less. So it's about 18 months that I'm back in Kuala Lumpur now. Yeah.
What's been your experience with the pandemic? Tell us, did it change you, or was it business as usual?
I have a very positive insight, I would say. I never felt that virtual working was the best option. But I think what we have learned over the pandemic is that if we all are alone, sitting in front of a computer, meetings can be very effective. I still have my doubts with hybrid meetings, where you have one room with 5 people and then 3 people calling in. I don't find that the whole meeting is very effective throughout the duration, while the 100% virtual meetings were, from my perspective, very efficient. And in my team, which is a global team, I've not seen any drop in efficiency. I would almost say we were more efficient over when we switched to remote working, and knowing that a lot of us have to commute for long times between home and work, and I think a lot of people made the best out of it and splitting the commuting time between having more time for their families, but also giving a little bit more time for the work.
So do you see working from home as a longer trend beyond the pandemic?
Yes, yeah, I see it. I don't see the barriers anymore that we had before, because we have the proof that there's always the underlying suspicion. Yeah, are we as effective? Are people really putting the time in at home that they would put in the office? And I think the results that we have seen have proven that it works. So the precedent is there.
So tell me, what is a typical day for a chief technology officer like you?
Now that I'm in KL, I'm at the front end of the time zone. So I'm a very active person. So I go out very early. I go for a run at 6 or 6:30 in the morning, come back. Sometimes I do a little bit of yoga, have a nice breakfast, and then I start maybe 9, sometimes even 10 o'clock. But then it goes long. Then I deal with my Asian team. Then I catch up with Italy, with the scientists that work there, and a few days per week, maybe 1 or 2 days per week, I have teleconferences with Brazil or with Chicago, where part of my team sits, and that can take me until 9 o'clock in the evening. But for me, it's fine because I have a lot of time in the morning to do what I like to do.
So a chief technology officer is responsible for the entire technology portfolio
Yes.
of Petronas. How many products do you have right now?
Well, it goes beyond products. Yeah, it also technology in Petronas Lubricants also comprises business technology, which you would call IT. That means I also cover digital, which today is a very good synergy because it's industrial lubricants, services that rely on digital tools are more and more coming into our business or are more and more part of our business. And so with the current job, I can bring together the digital aspects and the product aspects, if you see that. Petronas Lubricants, of course, we cover the whole spectrum of lubricants, so there's more than 1,000 products.
So what do you see as your biggest challenge as Chief Technology Officer? Is it the digitalization side, or is it the product development side, or certain, I don't know, formulation that, that keeps you awake sometimes thinking about it?
What keeps me awake, Ricky, is really it's the immobility. I think immobility for us in the lubricants industry is the biggest challenge. We know that it has happened. The challenge is to find the sweet spot. When do you shift your focus from the traditional lubricants that focus on mobility to e-mobility? How do you do it? And that is really something that keeps me awake at night. The discussions that we also see here at the conference, they are also, of course, inside the company, particularly if a global company. The shift to e-mobility in Europe goes much faster than here in Asia. So suddenly there's a lot of pressure. We need to focus, we need to shift technology efforts into e-mobility. But is it the right time to wind down your R&D work on automotive lubricants? And it's a big challenge, because we heard here, even Eugene mentioned it this morning, that a lot of the European OEMs stop or considerably reduce their R&D work on internal combustion engines. Should we do the same in the lubricants industry and stop the work on automotive lubricants? I think it's premature if we do that, because the internal combustion engine seems to have still a very long life in Asia. So we need to continue not only maintaining our portfolio, also develop new fluids for hybrid applications. Currently, we're just tweaking our engine oils and then call them, oh yeah, we have a hybrid solutions. But I believe we have to go deeper. We have to have dedicated engine lubricants for hybrid engines.
Do we have the resources for that right now, Eric? I mean, not just for Petronas, but as an industry?
I believe we should, because what my mental model is we can slowly phase down our efforts on automotive lubricants, not stop them, but phase them down, and at the same time ramp up the efforts on R&D on EV fluids. And if you get that right, that's why I was talking about the sweet spot, that you always shift your resources. So what you don't want is, you don't want scientists to lose their job. And I don't know we will see that in the industry. If we get the shift right as an industry, we will just repurpose scientists that today work on automotive or internal combustion engine lubricants and make them work on EV fluids.
Yeah, that will be interesting when it happens. Actually, it's happening now. I actually was talking to someone about her work at Shell, working on transmission fluids, and they're still working on the conventional as well as the e-transmission fluid. So it's a lot of things on their plate at this point, because you have to cover both markets. So you mentioned a while back too about the need to do advocacy work. Now, you're on the Council of the Asian Lubricants Industry Association. How do you see ALIA playing a role in this conversation? Not so much to keep on convincing people that we should still have automotive lubricants, but really delivering the right message that will be good for everyone, because we're not anti-climate change, we're not anti-immobility, because at the end of the day, we are all in this planet, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So tell us where you see Aliyah playing a role in this conversation.
I believe we have a big role to play as somebody who brings an unbiased view on mobility, and particularly in Asia, because what we see, Asia is not able to go EV at the same pace as Europe does. And there are a lot of infrastructural reasons for that. And we have countries in Asia, and you may refer to a lot of official documents that are out there that clearly show at what levels of carbonization of the grid EVs make sense and at what level not. And then it's very easy, you look into the countries, and some of the countries that are promoting EVs today, when they look into the carbon intensity of the electricity grids, you would say it's not the best. And the question that I have, why are they doing it? Is there enough stakeholder education done to make them aware of that? They're not yet at the point where they should be doing this. And the second aspect, of course, is that the electricity consumption in Asia is likely to go up with a population that gets wealthier and wealthier, and using electricity for EVs when a lot of people buy their first refrigerator. I don't know whether it's the wisest choice, but because it creates inequality. So we're promoting clean for the rich who can afford an EV, while those who can just afford their first refrigerator, they will suffer because there's no electricity available. So this balance needs to get is something we need to get right, and I'm very much in favor of having unbiased data. And even though I'm sitting here as a representative of the oil and gas industry, I would still consider myself very unbiased and very facts and data driven.
Yes, and I think that's the value that you bring into the conversation. You have a very solid technical background. You can communicate excellently, and I think Aliyah is very lucky to have you on the council, and we hope you continue doing the work that you've been doing. Thank you so much, Eric, for this conversation, and we hope to see you again in the very near future, maybe in KL, maybe in Singapore, but definitely in the region.
You will. Thank you very much, Vicky. Always pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.